Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for participating at today's press conference after the International Conference on Belarus. The floor is yours, Mr. Chancellor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Due to the COVID situation in Austria, today's conference on Belarus unluckily had to take place virtually, and I'm therefore all the more thankful, and it's a pleasure to welcome both of you, Svetlana and Oliver, personally here in Vienna. And I want to take this occasion to thank all the participants from EU level and internationally at today's conference. One thing is clear from our perspective: Belarus continues to be a major challenge for all of us. We continue to witness repression, violence, and brutal silencing of critical voices. But, as I stressed during the conference, we also continue to witness the enormous courage of women and men fighting for the freedoms, fighting for the rights, fighting for a new Belarus. And they need us more than ever. What is more, the massive tensions we are seeing at the border between Belarus and Poland and the continued cynical misuse of migrants as weapons against the European Union prove that the situation is currently even deteriorating. From my perspective, one thing is very clear: the EU must not give in to blackmail from Lukashenko. We have to respond united and very clearly to this state-sponsored hybrid attack against the European Union. And we will continue to stand with our friends in Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia and react promptly and clearly if needed. And that's why I welcome that the European Union, that the foreign ministers have decided to impose new sanctions against those responsible for this misuse of migration. Since October 2020, the EU has imposed several sanction packages, 5 in all, and nearly 170 people and 15 entities are under visa ban and targeted economic restrictions. And one thing which is important to us, we want to continue to fight against impunity. The perpetrators of grave human rights violations should know that one day, sooner or later, they will be held accountable for their acts. There cannot be impunity in the situation in Belarus. In this context, we strongly support the ongoing efforts by NGOs and within the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. But Austria always believed that sanctions cannot be the only language we apply to Belarus. Since the first days of the crisis, we have reached out to the civil society. We have been a strong advocate of a direct dialogue with the civil society in Belarus, and we have been organizing in Austria on several levels gatherings with them, roundtable discussions with opposition members, talks on constitutional reform, which have been profiting from the experience of the Council of Europe's Venice Commission. And with this in mind, we embarked on organizing today's international conference. I believe this conference is a strong international signal of support for a democratic, independent, and prosperous Belarus. Regardless of all the challenges we are facing within the European Union, we should not lose out of sight the fight of the people of Belarus for the fundamental freedoms and the fundamental rights. The gathering is today's conference is meant to find ways out of the current political impasse we are all in, and to look towards potential mechanisms for meaningful and inclusive political dialogue. Because we all know at the end of the day, it's only dialogue that can pave the way to a peaceful transition towards a new Belarus and to free and fair elections. We therefore brought together representatives of the Belarusian civil society and national states of the European Union, international organizations, and experts from around the globe. And addressed to you, Svetlana, I have to say directly, it is frustrating and sobering to see how little progress we have achieved since our last meeting. But you know that Austria has been talking to all sides ahead of this conference. We will continue to do so. We will continue to engage with the civil society in Belarus. We will continue to engage with all meaningful forces in the country and around in order to pave the way for meaningful dialogue which could lead to a positive narrative. And I assure you that we will continue in our commitment to a free, open, and importantly, an independent and sovereign Belarus. And that from our perspective is one thing is very clear. The Belarusian people have to remain the champions of their own destiny, of their democratic future and their democratic choices. So with that in mind, I have to say that is what united us today in the conference. We will continue to unite us. And I'm very happy again to welcome you all here in Vienna. And I'm looking forward to our continued work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor Schallenberg. Thank you, Mr. Linhart, for taking this brave initiative to organize this conference. We had a very efficient exchange today. It's important to have this historical discussion taking place in Vienna, at this crossroads of civilization in the heart of Europe. I'm glad that all of us today are speaking in one voice. Belarus must and will be free and democratic. Belarusians deserve to be respected by the government. Belarusians deserve to choose the leadership in fair elections. Belarusians deserve to live in a country ruled by law, but not a mob. Belarusians have shown great courage and unity despite the terror and massive repressions conducted by the criminal regime. We estimate up to 40,000 have been detained since 2020, up to 2,000 imprisoned under political charges. At least 10 died. Hundreds of thousands left the country fleeing from repressions. We witnessed the political crisis which has grown into a humanitarian catastrophe. We witnessed that domestic crisis became the crisis of regional security discussed at the UN Security Council and NATO. During today's discussion, I asked ministers to remember the brave people of Belarus, names and numbers that are strong with their courage in this spirit as we together look to a democratic future. And we are sure that only dialogue with Belarus people is the way to solve this crisis. And when I say dialogue, we don't mean dialogue between West and Belarus regime. There is no point in discussing anything with Lukashenko. He simply cannot be trusted. He cannot be re-educated. Experience shows that only pressure works. The aim of this pressure should be the dialogue between Belarusians. However, what dialogue can we have if those who must be part of it are still in prison? What dialogue can we have when people are being detained and tortured daily in KGB prisons? The real dialogue will begin only when all political prisoners are released and violence ends. Today, I asked ministers to refrain from any contacts with the regime until these conditions met. It would only strengthen the feeling of impunity. I also underlined today that independence and sovereignty of Belarus cannot be traded or undermined. All deals signed by illegitimate ruler cannot be recognized. Naturally, 2 hours is not enough to resolve the crisis in Belarus. However, as for outcomes, we laid out the principles of the EU strategy toward Belarus. It must include a comprehensive sanction policy on the one hand and flexible program of assistance for civil society. We understand that this conference today is the first step to real, not facade, changes in the country. And in the nearest possible future, we hope to gather again, hopefully in broader format, and make sure to take practical steps on solving Belarusian crisis. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Let me first of all thank Chancellor Schallenberg for hosting this conference. There's hardly a better place than Vienna to do it. Vienna, which has established the first diplomatic academy almost 300 years ago, which was called first the Academy of Oriental Languages. So I think in this town, people do understand when we talk about the East, when we talk about Eastern Europe. And this is why I'm very grateful that despite all the difficulties because of COVID, the Chancellor maintained this very important conference. Because we need to make it very clear that we continue to stand by the people of Belarus and their democratic aspirations. Because we think that in the face of the hardship inflicted by the regime, the EU has been, on the one hand, to assist the victims and repression, and we should also continue to help the civil society. More than 33 million euros have already been made available since last August, and we are preparing further assistance packages. Our aim is to provide targeted support to the civil society, independent media, youth, and small and medium-sized enterprises, and to the health sector. We are also supporting the Belarusian people in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic as part of our 75 million euros package to assist the Eastern Partnership countries with their vaccination campaigns. We stand by also the people of Belarus. And it is indeed crucial to deliver now the vaccines to the people who need them so urgently. And we have a clear eye on tomorrow, when we have proposed this year a comprehensive plan for economic support for the democratic Belarus. In May, we wanted to create a clear vision what the democratic Belarus can expect from Europe. You see, our commitment is very ambitious, and it should aim to stabilize the economy, unlock the growth potential, create jobs, democratize the country's institutions, and create a future of transition into a fully democratic country. That plan, which is of 3 billion euros, is a clear signal on our long-term commitment to the democratic choice of the Belarusian people. However, in recent weeks, we have seen not only a worrying escalation in the country, in oppressing the civil society and the democratic opposition, but also along our borders with Belarus. Let me emphasize that the weaponization of thousands of desperate people for political purposes and attacking the EU and any of its member states is not only unacceptable and needs to stop, but it will have consequences. The EU has acted strongly. As of now, we have expanded sanctions criteria for Belarus to target the perpetrators of the migration situation. We are already providing 700,000 euros to international agencies to alleviate the humanitarian situation. And we have stepped up our international outreach to halt the migration flows at source. And we are working into ways to further step up our response in a very targeted and effective manner, something that you should expect from us still this week. To conclude, as you see, Belarus remains at the top of the EU's agenda. We have and we will continue supporting its people, and we have and we will continue to support the democratic Belarus. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also want, at the beginning, welcome you, Svetlana, and you, Oliver, very much to Vienna. I think we had an excellent discussion today together with our other high-level guests, despite the virtual format due to the current health situation. Our aim in organizing this conference was simple. We wanted to involve all stakeholders to try and find a way out of the current political dead end. And we wanted to show that despite current events along the border, our attention is not drawn away from what is going on inside Belarus, that we stand with the people from Belarus. Vienna is a place of dialogue, of communication, of sitting down together to solve problems. This is what we want to do for Belarus. And we are very clear when it comes to our democratic values. And so we are very clear about the ongoing situation in Belarus, but also its future. We want a free Belarus, where the civil society can live without fear and repression. We want a democratic Belarus. That is why we support a domestic dialogue leading to free and fair elections. We want a stable Belarus, one that has good relations both with Europe and with Russia, because this is also essential for our security and for the stability of Europe. And we want a prosperous Belarus where everyone can flourish. Dialogue is the key of problem solving. It is the key for democracy. So this conference is a strong signal for our common goal, our joint values, and our openness for dialogue. And we are happy to announce that Austria will be funding an executive training course for 15 young experts from the Belarusian diaspora. It will be organized by the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, it will focus on diplomacy, international law, the rule of law, and intercultural communication and negotiation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now come to the questions. The first one would be for Austrian Public Television, Ms. Wolschek.
Wolschek, ORF Television. Mrs. Tichanovskaya, welcome to Austria. May I ask you, as the Chancellor said, there have been 5 packages of sanctions sideways from the EU. The EU has been trying to put pressure on the regime for quite some time now, but as it seems, the regime is still standing firm. What do you think? What are those practical steps you have been mentioning that need to be taken, and has the EU been doing enough so far? And Chancellor Schallenberg, if I may ask you, the situation at the border is putting itself an enormous pressure on the EU. And it seems as if the EU is kind of helpless in dealing with the situation. What's the strategy of the European Union to deal with the situation at the border that might even occur at other borderlines of the European Union in the future?
As for sanctions, the 5th package is only being prepared. It wasn't imposed yet. But the 4 packages we have seen before, they are rather strong enough, but we think that we have to continue strong sanction policy just to hit on the state-owned enterprises, state-owned businesses, because Lukashenko's regime understands only the language of power. They don't understand the diplomatic language. And, you know, the 4th package of sanctions left, it's a pity, rather a lot of loopholes. So sanctions don't work effectively very much at the moment, but we are sure that sanction policy will continue and will hit the most important for the regime, enterprises and banks and businesses.
May I continue on your question relating to the border? Honestly, we have seen a similar situation already last spring at the Turkish-Greek border. And I believe we have to be very clear that this is a situation which is not unique. And the way we react now might create precedents and might send the signal to third countries that yes, you can blackmail the European Union. Yes, you can force us. And I believe it's very important that we firmly react and that we react unitedly. And we do have the legal basis to help Poland. We do have the means and the possibility to help the countries affected. For instance, for my part, I don't see at all why the Polish or the Latvian or the Lithuanian taxpayers have to carry the whole burden of protecting our common external border. And we have the legal possibilities in the European Union. And we had a discussion at the last European Council, and I'm very much in favor of us showing a sign of solidarity and helping those countries which by history, geography, or coincidence are the front state of Schengen to safeguard the external border. But the situation again proves that we are unluckily faced with regimes and people who don't hesitate to abuse the weakest of the weak in order to get the political message across. And another thing where I have to congratulate the Commission is what they're doing is exactly the right thing, to act upstream. When, for instance, summer we had the direct flights coming in from Baghdad to Minsk, there were discussions with Iraq and the flights were ceased. They didn't stop the flow, but they made it a lot more difficult. So what we have to do, and it proves again, clear external border control and react upstream before the people arrive at the border, deceived by human smugglers, believing that they are at the border to Germany or something else. And we have to react upstream in the countries of transit and the countries of origin.
The next question would be from Ms. Kuschik from Belsat.
Hello, my question is to Mr. Chancellor. Austria is one of the main economic partners of Belarus, and we know that there are a lot of businesses prospering in our country. So will Austria stop or at least lower investment to the economy of Belarus? And the other question is to Mr. Commissioner. What about fifth package of sanctions? Will Belarus be a part of it? And when we can expect sixth package of sanctions? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, because it gives me the possibility to clarify a couple of things which sometimes in the past have been blurred a little bit in the public perception. The investment are not state investments, private companies investing there. So we are in a dialogue with them, but at the end of the day, it's their companies and shareholders deciding what they're doing. B, we had discussions on economic sanctions. We have imposed economic sanctions, but we have to draw a very thin line. We don't want to hit the people of Belarus, those which are already under pressure of the regime, those which are in prison where the families are threatened and so on. We don't want to hit them. So we have to be very cautious what kind of signals we're sending. And the last point would be, and having said so, I have to say Austria is not closed at all to discussing further sanctions. If they are necessary, if they send us a clear signal. We haven't been against them in the past, we won't be against them in the future, but they should avoid hitting those we want to protect, and these are the people, the men and women who courageously fight for the freedoms. They need our support and not our sanctions. And the third point, something we have to keep in mind, we have not so many eyes and ears in this country. So Western companies, to a certain degree, are a lifeline to the West. They abide by the rules of the Western shareholders. They have the rule of law and regulations to have to keep. If they pulled out tomorrow, which would be their own decision, then they would be replaced by other companies from other countries where maybe rule of law, human rights, and being responsible to a public is not an issue. So we have to think about these issues as well. Thank you.
On the fifth package, yes, the member states are discussing now the implementation of the fifth package. We do hope that they will make it quick. I do hope that within weeks or maybe in a shorter time they can come up with a list. Whether a specific company is on or off the list, I think it's too early to tell. Negotiations are ongoing. Of course, it's not only that company that could be mentioned, but some others. We will see. It remains to be seen after the debate.
So the next question would be for Mr. Höller from Austrian Press Agency.
Herr Bundeskanzler, wie wir wissen, haben Sie ja versucht, auch Vertreter des Regimes aus Minsk nach Wien zu dieser Konferenz zu bringen. Es gab ja dieses Treffen in New York mit dem belarussischen Außenminister. Woran ist das gescheitert? Gab es von Minsker Seite Forderungen in Bezug auf eine Teilnahme, aber auch in Bezug auf andere Fragen, die Sie nicht gewillt waren zu erfüllen?
The question was whether we tried to have representatives from Minsk here as well, and whether they imposed some preconditions for them to be able to participate. Is it okay if I answered? Yes. I had contacts and direct talks with Vladimir Mackay. We at the time agreed to keep them confidential. He went public with it, so be it. There were no preconditions. This conference was an opening, a possibility. And we wanted them to seize this possibility. If they don't, it's up to them. But I believe we should continuously create also incentives, possibilities for them to engage in a meaningful dialogue, because that is what the international community wants from them. And there are representatives of the Belarusian civil society, of the economic area here, but not direct representatives of Minsk, of the current leaders there. But I believe that in future we should continuously try to engage with them and bring them on the table together with the people of Belarus to discuss the future. That is what it is all about. And when I say that the people of Belarus have their own destiny in their hand, then those who have the power for the time being should engage with them and discuss what the common future should look like.
There are further questions? Yeah, Mr. Chaston.
Jean-Baptiste Chastan for Le Monde. You said you asked the European leader to stop discuss with the leaders in Minsk, but we all know Angela Merkel talked with Lukashenko in the last day to stop this migration crisis. Do you think it was a bad idea? And Mr. Schallenberg, how can we stop this migration crisis without talking with Lukashenko?
As for phone call of Chancellor Merkel, you know, I understand why it has been done, just for humanitarian aid to de-escalate the situation on the borders. And but as Belarusian, from the side of Belarusian people, it looked very strange, because more than 1 year we call for no dialogue with the regime, no recognition, no legitimization, but we were assured that it's not the sign of legitimization of the regime. It was done only to help people at the borders. But just I want to remind once again that people at the borders don't have to die, the same as Belarusian people in jails don't have to die as well. People on the borders don't have to starve. Belarusian people in jails don't have to starve either. So we always have to remember the core of the problem in Belarus and not distract attention from a crisis, humanitarian and political, in Belarus.
To answer your question instinctively, I would agree with you. If you want a change of behavior, then you should also try to talk to the people. I did very clearly express already in New York and in the past where we stand on this. I very clearly expressed that this will have repercussions, that the situation is cynical abuse of human beings, and the weakest, called migrants, is not going to go unanswered by the European Union, that this will increase and accelerate the vicious circle they're in. But on the other side, I have to say very clearly, if I look at the public statements of Lukashenko, then I doubt whether direct dialogue on that would lead to anything, because he has been so clear on why he's doing this. He's not even trying to hide his motives behind the situation at the borders with a couple of EU member states. But instinctively, yes, in the long run, we need to engage.
Thanks. Now the press conference comes to an end.